Part 1, Whispers Beneath the Stone. Janet had never liked cemeteries, not even as a child. While other kids dared each other to run past the gates or hide behind tombstones, she always kept her distance. But now, 29 and newly heartbroken, she found herself standing before the rusted iron gates of Hollow Pines Cemetery, clutching a bouquet of wilted roses and her coat tight around her. The air smelled of damp soil and cold decay. The cemetery hadn't had a burial in years, yet the ground seemed freshly disturbed in places. Grass grew unevenly, and crows perched silently along the treetops, staring like sentinels. She was here for her grandmother. Just leave the flowers, say a few words, and go, Janet whispered to herself. But as she passed through the gate, the temperature dropped. Her breath fogged in front of her, and the hinges groaned behind her as the gate closed on its own. She stopped walking. That was weird. Brushing it off, she continued, weaving between headstones worn smooth by rain and time. Her grandmother's grave was near the back, under the shadow of a crumbling mausoleum no one claimed anymore. As she reached the grave, she noticed something odd. The headstone was cracked, freshly cracked. And the earth in front of it stirred. She knelt to place the flowers, her fingers trembling, and saw it, faint scratches on the stone. Not random weathering, letters. Carved hastily. Desperate. Help me. Janet stumbled back. She blinked. The scratches were still there. A sudden gust of wind blew through the trees, moaning like a voice. Her heart pounded. Just the wind, she said aloud, but her voice shook. Then she heard it. A whisper. So faint she almost thought she imagined it. But then again, closer this time, just above the rustle of leaves, Janianit. Her blood ran cold. She turned slowly, scanning the gravestones behind her. Nothing. But when she looked back at her grandmother's grave, the flowers were gone. In their place sat something else. A small porcelain doll, dirt-caked, eyes missing, its mouth cracked into a jagged grin. Janet gasped, heart slamming in her chest. She hadn't brought that. She wouldn't. It hadn't been there before. She backed away, tripping over an uneven stone and hitting the ground hard. When she looked up, the doll was closer. Sitting on the edge of the grave. As if it had moved. By itself. Part 2, The Doll That Waits. Janet scrambled to her feet, her palms scraped and stinging from the gravel. She didn't take her eyes off the doll. It sat perched at the grave's edge, its cracked porcelain face tilted slightly as if it were watching her. She backed away slowly. Her instinct screamed, run. But something kept her rooted. Who put that here, she whispered, almost hoping someone, anyone, would jump out and say it was a prank. But the cemetery remained deathly silent. Even the wind had stopped. She glanced at her phone. No signal. Figures. She forced herself to move toward the path that led back to the gates, not daring to look back. Her boots crunched over damp leaves and old moss. The cemetery felt deeper now, like the rows of graves had shifted while she wasn't looking, pulling her farther in. She walked faster. And then she heard it again. Janet. It wasn't the wind this time. It was clearer. Closer. Feminine. She froze. That voice, it almost sounded like her grandmother's. But her grandmother had been dead for 7 months. No, she said aloud, shaking her head. No one's here. No one's. A cold hand closed around her ankle. Janet screamed. She looked down, heart hammering, and saw nothing. But her skin burned where the fingers had touched, a red mark already forming, thin, bruised lines like long nails had gripped her. She ran. Her breath came in sharp gasps as she sprinted down the path, barely dodging headstones and overgrown vines. The cemetery felt endless now, the gate nowhere in sight. Until she saw something strange. A light, flickering, pale, and unnatural, coming from the crumbling mausoleum near her grandmother's grave, the same one that always made her uneasy as a kid. Something drew her toward it. Not curiosity. Not fear. It was like a thread had wrapped around her chest, tugging. She should run the other way. Instead, she stepped closer. The stone door of the mausoleum stood open just a crack, and the light pulsed from within. As she approached, the air grew colder again, and a faint sound, like chanting, rose from the depths inside. She placed a trembling hand on the door and pushed it open. Inside, the air was damp and thick with the scent of rotting flowers. Cobwebs clung to the walls, and the stone floor was stained with something dark. At the far end stood a stone altar. And on it, the doll. Only now, it wasn't small. It was nearly the size of a child. Its porcelain body had long cracks running down its arms and legs, and its eye sockets were hollow, black pits. Its head turned, slowly, to face her. "You came back," it said, in her grandmother's voice. Janet's scream echoed through the mausoleum. Part 3, The Mausoleum's Secret. Janet stumbled backward, her heel striking the edge of the mausoleum's stone step. She fell hard, her back hitting the ground, eyes locked on the life-sized doll still seated on the altar. The thing smiled, or something like it. The jagged cracks in its porcelain face shifted just enough to suggest a grin. And though its mouth didn't move again, Janet still heard her grandmother's voice in her head, "Don't leave me alone down here." "No," Janet whispered. "This isn't real." But the chill in the air was real. The bruise on her ankle was real. The grave, the voice, the scratches on the stone, they were all real. She got to her feet, legs shaky, and backed out of the mausoleum. The door slammed shut behind her. Hard. Janet jumped and turned, expecting to see someone, or something, standing there. But the path was empty. She reached out, tried the stone door. Sealed. Not even a seam remained. It was like the mausoleum had swallowed itself whole. Janet backed away, heart pounding. The fog was thicker now. Thick enough to hide the gravestones around her. She turned in place, trying to find the path again, but realized, suddenly, that all the headstones nearby had changed. No names. No dates. Just smooth stone and a symbol, a spiral carved into each one, like something ancient and wrong. Then, a whisper. But this time, it wasn't calling her name. It was chanting. Low, rhythmic, and getting closer. She turned toward the sound, and through the mist, shapes began to form. Figures. Moving. Slowly. Shuffling between graves. She ducked behind a headstone, peeking over its edge. They were dressed in old burial clothes, Victorian, colonial, some even modern, all worn and rotted. Their skin was pale, damp, mud-soaked. The dead. Walking. They circled the mausoleum like mourners in a twisted funeral procession. Some carried candles that didn't flicker. Others clutched objects, bones, dolls, pieces of broken furniture. One dragged a rusted shovel behind him, the sound shrieking against stone. Then she saw it. One of them had a face like hers. Her double stared straight ahead, vacant-eyed, and held in her arms a second doll, smaller this time, but still cracked and grinning. Janet bit her knuckles to keep from screaming. The circle of undead stopped. One by one, they turned to look at her. "Welcome home, Janet," they whispered in one voice. She ran. No plan. No direction. Just pure instinct. Branches tore at her face. Fog closed in tighter. The cemetery twisted around her, the layout changing, reshaping. And then she broke through the mist. She was standing before the gate. Only, it was closed, chained shut with a thick iron lock. Her hands fumbled at it, pulling, shaking, crying. "Let me out," she screamed. "Let me out." Behind her, the chanting grew louder. Footsteps dragged closer. Janet turned. And the doll was there. Back to its smaller form. Standing upright now. On the inside of the gate. It looked up at her with its hollow face. "You were chosen," it said. Then it raised one cracked arm and pointed behind her. Janet turned. And saw the entire graveyard rising. Part 4, The Spiral Pact. The graveyard trembled. Janet watched in frozen horror as dozens of hands clawed up through the soil, wet, pale, and writhing. The ground split open as bodies long buried emerged, eyes hollow, mouths agape in silent screams. Tombstones cracked. Roots curled like fingers reaching out from below. The chanting had stopped. Only the sound of earth shifting remained, followed by the doll's laughter. It wasn't a child's giggle. It was wrong. Too deep, too human, too knowing. Janet backed against the locked gate, tears streaming down her cheeks. "What do you want from me?" The doll tilted its head. "We want you to remember." Then. Flash. A sharp image hit her mind like lightning. A memory. But not hers. A girl, wearing old-fashioned clothes, standing in the cemetery. Alone. Digging. Hands raw and bloodied as she unearthed something beneath the roots of a twisted tree, a small, black spiral stone. As soon as she touched it, her mouth opened in a silent scream, and dozens of dolls appeared behind her, stepping forward from the shadows like a forgotten army. The image faded. Janet gasped and stumbled back. "What was that?" she whispered. The doll stepped closer. "Your blood remembers." Janet shook her head violently. "No. That wasn't me. It was once." And then she heard a new sound, the same voice from the mausoleum, now right beside her ear. "You broke the circle, and now it must be sealed again." Suddenly, her ankle burned, searing heat, like a brand had been pressed into her skin. She fell to the ground, clutching it, and saw with horror the skin shifting before her eyes. A symbol was being carved into her flesh. The spiral. "No," she screamed, scraping at it, trying to rub it away. The doll looked pleased. "You returned to where it all began," it said. "You opened the gate between sleep and waking. Now we cross." Janet crawled backward, but the figures were closing in. Some were no longer corpse-like. Some were familiar. Faces from dreams. Faces she'd seen in family photos. Her bloodline. And they all bore the same spiral carved into their skin. "You belong to the hollow circle now," they whispered. "Why me?" Janet sobbed. "Because you're the last." Then the doll lifted its porcelain hands to the sky, and the clouds above the cemetery parted, revealing a swirling vortex of darkness, shaped like the spiral carved into the earth itself. The wind howled. The ground opened. And Janet screamed as the cemetery swallowed her whole. Part 5, Beneath the Spiral. Janet didn't fall. She sank. The ground didn't feel like dirt anymore, it felt like water and ash and memory all at once. Her limbs flailed uselessly in the darkness, but there was no air, no light, no up. Then. She landed. Hard. She gasped, surprised to find she could breathe, though the air was thick, warm, and tasted faintly of iron. When her eyes adjusted, she saw she wasn't in a tunnel or a cave, but something far stranger. A vast underground chamber, carved in a perfect spiral, stretched in every direction. The walls pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat, and every inch was etched with the spiral symbol, over and over. Some moved when she blinked. Others seemed to stare back. She stood up shakily. The ground under her feet was soft and wrong, like damp fabric or old skin. A dim, reddish light glowed from the center of the spiral ahead, and without knowing why, Janet began walking toward it. With every step, she heard whispers. "Janet, blood of the last, bearer of the mark." She ignored them. She had to get out. But something was waiting at the center. A mirror. 7 feet tall, framed in bone, and covered in dust. But not just any mirror. When Janet looked into it, the reflection wasn't her. It was the girl from the vision. The one who dug up the stone. Her face was streaked with dirt and blood. Her eyes were filled with regret. And her lips moved. "I buried it, but I couldn't stop it." Janet stared in horror. "You released it." The reflection raised a hand. Its palm bore the same spiral brand now burning on Janet's ankle. And then the mirror shattered. 1,000 shards flew outward, but instead of cutting her, they floated around her, hovering like glass memories. Inside each fragment, she saw pieces of her own life. Her grandmother whispering old lullabies with strange words Janet had never understood. Her mother crying over a burned book she said should never have been opened. Janet as a child, drawing spirals over and over in her notebook without knowing why. Then she saw the truth. Her family had bound something here. Something ancient. They hadn't buried it to honor the dead. They'd trapped it. And Janet? She was the one who broke the seal. The whispers returned, louder now. Angry. She let it out. She broke the pact. The vessel is open. The walls of the chamber began to crumble. The spiral twisted, the light deepened. And from the shadows behind the mirror, something stepped forward. It wasn't human. It was tall, faceless, draped in torn burial cloths that moved as though alive. Its limbs were too long. Its hands were bound in chains. And it carried the original doll in its arms, the one from the altar. Only now, the doll's face was smooth, and it looked exactly like Janet. "You belong to the spiral," the creature said. Its voice was many, young, old, living, dead. The air tightened around her, the chamber closing in. Janet screamed. And the spiral on her ankle began to glow. Part 6, The Vessel and the Void. The spiral burned. It felt like fire crawling up Janet's leg, searing her veins, lacing her blood with ancient rot. She fell to her knees, screaming as the glowing mark spread, up her thigh, along her side, across her chest, spiraling inward toward her heart. The entity before her, the faceless one, lowered the doll gently onto the ground. It stared down at Janet, though it had no eyes. "You are the gate," it said. "I'm not," she gasped, clutching her ribs. "I didn't ask for this." "You were born for this," it replied. "As all of your blood were." The whispers rose around her like a storm, now clearer. "She opened it, she carries it, she must contain it." And then the spiral beneath her lit up, a full circle carved into the chamber floor, glowing with impossible light. It pulsed with life, drawing symbols from the walls, the mirror shards, and even her own mind. Janet looked down and saw her reflection again, this time, not in a mirror, but in the air itself. She wasn't herself anymore. Her skin was paper white. Her eyes were completely black. The spiral glowed from her chest, etched into the bone. She was becoming the new vessel. "No," she shouted, staggering to her feet. "There has to be a way to stop this." "There is," the faceless one said. "Seal the spiral. Bind it to flesh. Contain it for another generation." "Another generation?" "A sacrifice," it replied. "You." The truth hit like a thunderclap. This was the pact her family had made. Every few generations, one was chosen to carry the spiral. To absorb the curse. To keep it buried beneath the cemetery so it wouldn't infect the world above. That was what the mausoleum was. A prison. Not for the dead, but for the thing beneath them. Janet fell back, breath ragged, the pieces finally coming together. Her grandmother hadn't just died. She had been the previous vessel. And when she passed, the spiral woke up, searching for its new host. That was why the grave cracked. Why the doll appeared. Why Janet was pulled back here, like a string tugging at her soul. She was next. The Faceless One extended a long, skeletal hand. Accept your place. Seal the spiral. Or let it spill into your world. Janet looked up at the swirling void forming above the spiral pit, visions flashing through it, cities burning, people walking in circles with hollow eyes, children humming lullabies to eyeless dolls, the world looping endlessly in madness. A choice. Be the gate. Or let it open. She reached inside her coat. Her hand closed around something cold. The spiral stone. The one she hadn't realized she'd pocketed when she first visited the grave. It pulsed in her palm, matching the rhythm of her heart. You can change the pact, a voice echoed, faint, familiar. Her grandmother's voice. One sacrifice. Or all are lost. Janet gripped the stone tighter. She looked at the Faceless One. Then down at the doll wearing her face. And made her choice. Part 7, The Breaking of the Circle. Janet's fingers clenched tighter around the cold spiral stone, feeling its pulse sync with her own ragged heartbeat. The chamber's oppressive silence thickened, as if the very walls waited, breath held. Make your choice, the Faceless One whispered, its voice like dry leaves rustling in a forgotten grave. Her mind screamed with memories, her grandmother's gentle hands, the burnt book, the secret lullaby, and the countless faces of the past vessels, trapped in this endless spiral of sacrifice. The void above pulsed with growing hunger, swirling with shadows of madness ready to spill. Janet swallowed hard. Closing her eyes, she raised the spiral stone toward her chest. The stone's glow flared, engulfing her in blinding light. When she opened her eyes, the chamber was changing. The spiral on the floor burned brighter, but its endless loop was cracking, fracturing into jagged lines. The Faceless One recoiled, its form distorting. You cannot break the pact, it hissed. Janet's voice was steady, stronger than she felt. I'm not just the vessel. I'm the breaker. The shards of the mirror around her floated up, circling like shards of a shattered past, then surged toward the void above. With a scream of defiance, Janet threw the spiral stone into the center of the chamber. The stone shattered. Light exploded outward, and the void screamed. The walls of the chamber trembled, the spiral carvings cracking and dissolving into dust. The Faceless One let out a howl, then dissolved into shadows that were swallowed by the fading darkness. Janet collapsed to her knees, the brand on her ankle cooling, fading. For the first time in generations, the spiral pact was broken. The tombs above sealed themselves shut. The grave ceased trembling. The crows flew away. And Janet, wounded, exhausted, but free, climbed from the depths beneath Hollow Pines Cemetery. Outside, dawn was breaking. The nightmare was over. Or maybe it had just begun. Part 8, Dawn or Darkness. Janet emerged from the cemetery's gate, the early morning light washing over her like a fragile promise. Her clothes were torn, her skin pale, but the burning spiral on her ankle was gone, replaced by a faint scar shaped like a broken circle. She took a shaky breath, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. Freedom. For the first time in years, she felt alive. Behind her, the gates groaned open on their own, as if inviting her to leave the past behind. She stepped forward. But as she walked down the path, a strange chill lingered, an echo in the bones of the earth. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. A message. No number. No sender. Just 3 words, the spiral waits. Janet froze. A shadow passed over the tombstones behind her. Her heart pounded again, not from fear, but from the knowledge that the spiral story was far from finished. Because some curses don't die. They just wait.